Mastering Your Emotions, The Key to Lasting Peace and Power. Preface. The day I lost control. I still remember the email that destroyed my afternoon. It was 3 sentences long, barely 100 words, and it made my hands shake with anger. A colleague had seeded half the company on what felt like a personal attack, disguised as constructive feedback. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to fire back a response that would set the record straight. I had paragraphs forming in my mind, each one sharper than the last. Then my phone rang. I ignored it. Then it rang again. It was my daughter's school. She'd fallen on the playground and needed to be picked up. Nothing serious, just a scraped knee and hurt feelings. But when I got there, still buzzing with that email-induced rage, I snapped at the school nurse for not calling me sooner. I was short with my daughter in the car. I brought that anger home with me like a dark cloud, and it poisoned my entire evening. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in my kitchen and realized something that changed everything. The email that had hijacked my entire day, I reread it. Without the fog of immediate emotion, I saw it differently. It wasn't even about me. My colleague was stressed about a project deadline and had poor communication skills. That was it. I had given 3 sentences of text the power to ruin my relationship with a school nurse I'd never see again, make my daughter's rough day worse, and turn me into someone I didn't recognize. I had let a temporary emotion dictate permanent actions, and I'd done it 1,000 times before. This book is the result of what I learned after that day. It's about the space between what happens to you and what you do about it. That space is where your real power lives. Not in controlling what others do or say, not in being right all the time, not in winning every argument or defending every misunderstanding. Your power lives in the moment when you feel the urge to react and you choose, consciously, to do something different. Over the next hour, I'm going to share what I've learned about emotional mastery from my own failures, from the research I've studied, and from the hundreds of people I've worked with who struggled with the same challenge. We're going to explore why we react the way we do, what it costs us, and most importantly, how to stop. This isn't about suppressing your emotions or becoming cold and detached. It's about feeling everything but being controlled by nothing. It's about leading yourself with clarity, instead of being dragged around by every feeling that surfaces. If you've ever sent a text you regretted, said something in anger you can't take back, or let someone else's behavior ruin your peace, this book is for you. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The 2-second gap. There's a famous study from the 1960s that most people have heard about, but few truly understand. Researchers at Stanford put marshmallows in front of young children and told them they could eat 1 now, or wait 15 minutes and get 2. Some kids grabbed the marshmallow immediately. Others squirmed, covered their eyes, sang songs to themselves, but ultimately waited. Years later, the researchers followed up. The kids who had waited had better life outcomes across nearly every measure, higher test scores, healthier relationships, even lower rates of addiction. But here's what most people miss about the marshmallow test. It wasn't about willpower. It wasn't about being stronger or tougher. The kids who succeeded were the ones who found strategies to create distance between the urge and the action. They didn't try to resist the marshmallow through pure force. They looked away. They distracted themselves. They created a gap. That gap is everything. Think about the last time you reacted in a way you regretted. Maybe you yelled at someone in traffic. Maybe you fired off an angry email. Maybe you said something cutting to your partner during an argument. What happened in the moment before? I'm willing to bet there was a feeling, a surge of emotion, anger or fear or frustration, and then almost immediately you acted on it. The gap between feeling and action was so small you didn't even notice it. Now think about a time when you handled something well. Someone criticized you and you stayed calm. Someone cut you off in traffic and you let it go. Someone said something hurtful and you chose not to escalate. What was different? You found the gap. Even if it was just for a second or two, you created space between stimulus and response. I learned this the hard way during my first year of management. I had an employee, I'll call him Marcus, who constantly challenged me in meetings. Every suggestion I made, he had a counterpoint. Every decision, a question. At first, I tried to stay professional, but after a few weeks, I started reacting. I'd get defensive, I'd shut him down publicly. I'd feel my heart rate spike the moment he raised his hand to speak. One day, my own manager pulled me aside. She said something I'll never forget. You're letting him control the meeting before he even opens his mouth. You've already decided to be angry. You're reacting to what you think he'll say, not what he's actually saying. She was right. I had collapsed the gap completely. The moment I saw Marcus, I felt frustrated, and I let that feeling control my behavior. I wasn't managing him. I wasn't even listening to him. I was just reacting to my own emotion about him. So I tried something different. The next meeting, when Marcus raised his hand, I felt that familiar spike of irritation. But instead of speaking immediately, I took a breath. Just one. I counted to 3 in my head. It sounds almost embarrassingly simple, but in those 3 seconds, something shifted. I heard his actual question instead of the attack I expected, and I realized he was right. He'd identified a real problem with my proposal. That 2-second gap saved me from making a bad decision and looking foolish in front of my team. More importantly, it taught me that I had a choice. Between the feeling and the action, there was space, and in that space, I could choose to be the person I wanted to be, instead of the reactive version of myself that emotions created. Here's the truth most self-help advice won't tell you. You cannot control your initial emotional reaction. When something happens, your brain reacts in milliseconds. Fear, anger, jealousy, frustration, these responses are hardwired. They're evolutionary. Your brain is trying to protect you from threats, and it doesn't stop to ask if the threat is a charging bear or a mildly annoying email. But you can control what happens next. You can train yourself to notice the emotion, to feel it fully, and to create space before you act on it. This is not about suppression. Suppressing emotions is like holding a beach ball underwater. Eventually, it explodes to the surface, usually at the worst possible moment. This is about acknowledgement and choice. When you feel the urge to react, try this. Name it. Say to yourself, I'm feeling angry right now, or I'm feeling defensive. This simple act of labeling creates distance. You move from being anger to observing anger. From there, you can ask yourself one critical question. What do I want to happen next? Not, what do you feel like doing? What do you want to happen? Do you want to damage this relationship? Do you want to regret this text message in an hour? Do you want to give this person power over your peace? Usually the answer is no. That gap, that 2-second pause between feeling and action, is where your real power lives. It's where you stop being reactive and start being intentional. It's where temporary emotions stop dictating permanent consequences. The people who seem to have unshakable calm aren't people who don't feel things. They're people who have mastered the gap. They feel the anger, the frustration, the hurt, but they've trained themselves to pause. And in that pause, they choose their response instead of being chosen by their emotion. Start practicing this today. The next time you feel a strong emotion, before you speak or act, take 2 seconds. Count them if you have to. In those 2 seconds, you're not being weak. You're not suppressing anything. You're giving yourself the gift of choice, and that choice is the foundation of everything else we're going to build together. Chapter 2. The Prison of Being Right. My father and I didn't speak for almost a year because of a misunderstanding about a birthday party. I'd forgotten to invite him to my son's celebration. Not intentionally, there was a mix-up with the invitations, and his got lost. But he decided it was deliberate. He decided I was punishing him for something, that I was being petty, that I didn't value him. I tried to explain. I sent emails. I called. I showed him the invitation list, the mix-up, the apologies from the company that printed them. Nothing worked. He had constructed a narrative in his mind, and every piece of evidence I presented got filtered through that narrative. I wasn't trying to make things right. I was covering my tracks. I wasn't apologizing. I was being condescending. He had decided I was wrong, and he needed to be right more than he needed the relationship. Eventually, I gave up trying to convince him, not because I didn't care, but because I realized I was destroying my own peace, trying to fix his perspective. I was spending hours crafting the perfect text message, rehearsing conversations in my head, losing sleep over how to make him understand, and none of it was changing anything. Here's what I learned. Sometimes people need to be wrong about you, and your job is to let them. We live in a culture that treats being misunderstood as an emergency. Someone gets the wrong impression, and we immediately go into damage control mode. We explain, justify, defend, provide context, send follow-up messages, recruit mutual friends to vouch for us. We'll spend enormous amounts of energy trying to change one person's mind because we cannot stand the idea that somewhere someone thinks poorly of us. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You will be misunderstood, frequently, by people you care about and by people you barely know. You will be misquoted, misrepresented, and misjudged. And most of the time, there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. Because here's the thing about changing someone's mind. It only works if they want to change it. If someone has decided you're a certain kind of person, if they've committed to a narrative about your intentions or character, no amount of explaining will shift that. In fact, the more you try, the more suspicious they become. Your explanations become proof that you're defensive. Your evidence becomes proof that you're manipulative. I had a friend, another example, who told a mutual acquaintance that I'd said something I absolutely never said. When I found out, my first instinct was to confront her, to set the record straight, to make sure everyone knew the truth. I drafted a message. Then I sat with it, and I asked myself, what am I actually trying to accomplish here? Was I trying to repair the relationship? No. Honestly, I wasn't. The relationship had been strained for a while. Was I trying to protect my reputation with the mutual acquaintance? Maybe, but that person knew me well enough to be skeptical of the claim anyway. Was I trying to make my friend admit she was wrong? Yes, that was it. I wanted her to acknowledge the lie. I wanted to be right, and I realized that need, that desperate need to be right, was going to cost me more than just letting it go. So I did nothing. I let her be wrong about me. And you know what happened? Nothing. The world didn't end. The mutual acquaintance never brought it up. My reputation survived, and I kept my peace. Letting people be wrong about you is an act of profound self-respect. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need your validation to confirm it. It says, my peace is worth more than winning this argument. It says, I'm not going to let your misunderstanding become my emergency. This doesn't mean you never defend yourself. If someone is spreading lies that could damage your career or harm your family, that's different. But most misunderstandings aren't that. Most are just someone having an incorrect opinion, and incorrect opinions, left alone, usually fade on their own. Think about the last time you tried to change someone's mind about you. How did it go? Did they suddenly see the light and apologize? Or did they dig in deeper, find new reasons to justify their position, and make you feel even more frustrated? Now think about how much energy you spent. Was it worth it? Here's what I do now. When someone misunderstands me, I ask myself 3 questions. First, is this person open to changing their mind? Are they asking questions, or are they making accusations? Are they listening, or are they just waiting for their turn to speak? Second, does this relationship matter enough to invest the energy? Not everyone deserves access to your time and emotional resources. And third, am I defending the truth, Or am I defending my ego? That last question is the hardest one. Because usually, if I'm being honest, it's ego. I want to be right. I want to be understood. I want to be validated. But those wants are black holes. They consume infinite energy and give back nothing. My father and I eventually reconciled, but not because I convinced him he was wrong. We reconciled because I stopped trying. I called him on his birthday, not to rehash the invitation incident, but just to wish him well. I showed up at family events without bringing it up. I let time and consistent behavior speak louder than my explanations ever could. Eventually he softened. He never explicitly admitted he was wrong, but he didn't need to. We both moved forward. That's the thing about letting people be wrong about you. It gives them space to change their minds, quietly, without the pressure of admitting fault. And even if they never change their minds, you've protected something more valuable than being right. You've protected your peace. Starting today, practice this. The next time someone misunderstands you, take a breath before you explain. Ask yourself if they're actually open to hearing you, or if they've already decided. If they've decided, let them. Walk away. Save your energy for people who are willing to listen and for pursuits that actually matter. Your integrity is not up for debate. You know who you are. You know what you meant. And for the people who matter, for the people who are truly in your corner, that will always be enough. Chapter 3. Sitting in the fire. There's a moment that happens in every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable situation, every tense interaction. It's the moment when everything in you wants to run. Not literally run, although sometimes that too, but escape. Change the subject. Check your phone. Make a joke. Pour another drink. Find a distraction. Do anything at all, except sit in the discomfort. I used to be a master at this. Anytime a conversation got heavy, I'd deflect. If my wife wanted to talk about something serious, I'd suddenly remember an urgent email. If a friend confronted me about something I'd done, I'd minimize it or turn it around. If I felt anxious or ashamed, I'd scroll through social media until the feeling passed. I thought I was managing my emotions. I was actually just running from them. The turning point came during a therapy session I didn't want to be in. I'd agreed to go to make my wife happy, but I had no intention of actually doing the work. The therapist asked me about my relationship with my mother, and I felt this immediate urge to shut down, not just to change the subject, but to physically leave the room. My chest got tight, my palms started sweating, and I stood up. The therapist, to her credit, didn't react. She just said, "Can you sit back down and tell me what you're feeling right now?" I wanted to say, "I'm feeling like this is a waste of money." But what came out instead was, "I'm feeling like if I talk about this, something bad is going to happen." "Like what?" she asked. I sat back down, and I stayed there, in that awful tight-chested discomfort. And I said, "I don't know." We sat in silence for what felt like an hour but was probably 2 minutes. And then I said, "I'm scared that if I admit my mother wasn't perfect, I'll lose the good memories too." Nothing bad happened when I said it. The room didn't collapse. I didn't fall apart. But something shifted. The tension I'd been running from my entire adult life didn't go away, but it changed shape. It went from this massive, terrifying thing to something I could look at and name. That's what sitting in the fire does. It doesn't make the discomfort disappear, but it transforms it from something that controls you into something you can work with. Here's what most people don't understand about difficult emotions. They're not dangerous. They're just uncomfortable. Your brain treats discomfort like a threat, because, evolutionarily, discomfort often meant danger. But in modern life, most emotional discomfort is just your psyche trying to tell you something. When you feel anxious, your body is saying, "Pay attention to this." When you feel angry, it's saying, "A boundary has been crossed." When you feel sad, it's saying, "You've lost something that mattered." These are information signals, not emergencies. But when you run from them, when you distract or numb or avoid, you never get the message. You just keep triggering the alarm. And here's the costly part. Most of the damage in our lives comes from what we do to avoid feeling what we feel. We drink too much to avoid anxiety. We lash out in anger to avoid vulnerability. We ghost people to avoid difficult conversations. We make terrible decisions in the name of escaping temporary discomfort, and then we live with permanent consequences. I have a friend who ended a 5-year relationship via text message because he couldn't sit through the discomfort of a breakup conversation. He knew she deserved better. He knew it was cowardly, but the tension of imagining that conversation was so unbearable that he took the escape route. And now he lives with the guilt and the damage to his reputation and the knowledge that he betrayed his own values because he couldn't sit in the fire for 30 minutes. Learning to sit with tension is the most practical form of emotional strength you can build. It's not dramatic, it's not inspiring in the moment. It's just you feeling something uncomfortable and not running from it. Here's how you practice. The next time you feel that urge to escape, to distract, to numb, pause. Name what you're feeling. I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm feeling exposed right now. I'm feeling like I want to avoid this conversation. Then, do something revolutionary. Stay. Don't fix it. Don't analyze it to death. Don't try to make it go away. Just notice where you feel it in your body. Is it in your chest, your stomach, your throat? Breathe into it. Not deep, meditative breaths, necessarily, just normal breaths. While you pay attention to the sensation, set a timer if you need to. 5 minutes. Tell yourself, I'm going to sit with this feeling for 5 minutes, and then I can decide what to do. Usually, one of two things happens. Either the feeling passes, or it transforms into something more specific that you can actually address. I remember doing this during a work conflict. My boss had criticized my performance in a meeting, and I felt that familiar urge to go defensive, to fire back an email explaining why he was wrong, to call a friend and vent. Instead, I sat at my desk and let myself feel it. The shame, the anger, the fear that maybe he was right and I was failing. I didn't try to talk myself out of any of it. I just felt it. After about 10 minutes, something interesting happened. The anger faded, and underneath it was something else. Fear about job security and old wounds from a childhood where nothing I did was ever good enough. This wasn't about my boss at all. This was about a pattern I'd been carrying for decades. That awareness only came because I sat in the fire. If I'd reacted immediately, if I'd defended or distracted or numbed, I'd have missed it, and I'd have kept playing out that same pattern in every job, every relationship, every challenge. Sitting with tension teaches you that emotions are temporary. They rise, they peak, and they pass. Always. But only if you give them space. When you run, they chase you. When you numb them, they wait for you. But when you sit with them, when you acknowledge them and feel them fully, they move through you and transform. This is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming unafraid of your emotions. It's about building the confidence to say, I can feel this and not fall apart. I can sit in discomfort and not need to escape it. Start small. The next time you feel anxious about a conversation, don't immediately reach for your phone. Sit with it. The next time you feel sad, don't immediately distract yourself. Feel it. Notice what it teaches you. Build your capacity to be with yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Because here's the truth. The things you're running from are the things you need to face. And the strength to face them is already inside you. You just have to stop running long enough to find it. Chapter 4. The Power of Silence.
I once lost a friendship because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. A close friend made a decision I thought was a mistake. She was leaving a stable job to pursue something risky, and I had opinions, strong ones, so I shared them, in detail, with charts, basically. I explained all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons she should reconsider, all the logic she was missing.
She listened politely, thanked me for my concern, and then proceeded to do exactly what she'd planned, and she never called me for advice again. It took me years to realize what had happened. She hadn't been asking for my opinion. She'd been sharing her excitement. She'd already made the decision. She was looking for support, not a debate, and by giving her my unsolicited analysis, I'd communicated something loud and clear. I didn't trust her judgment. I thought I knew better. What I should have done was stay silent, not as punishment or passive aggression, but as respect, as a recognition that her life was hers to live, and my need to be heard didn't trump her need to be trusted. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. We live in a world that rewards talking. The loudest voice in the meeting gets heard. The person with the quickest comeback wins the argument. We're taught that silence means weakness, that if you're not speaking up, you're getting walked over. But real power doesn't need to announce itself. Real confidence doesn't need to be constantly validated. And real wisdom knows when to speak and when to stay quiet. Think about the people you respect most. Are they the ones who always have something to say? Or are they the ones who speak carefully, who choose their words, who can sit in a room full of noise and remain unbothered by the pressure to contribute? I'm guessing it's the latter, because there's something magnetic about someone who doesn't need to fill every silence, who doesn't rush to defend themselves, who can listen to criticism without immediately countering it. Here's what I've learned about silence. It's not the absence of something, it's the presence of self-control. When you choose silence, you're not being passive, you're being deliberate. You're saying, I don't need to react right now. I'm secure enough to wait. This was a hard lesson for me. I grew up in a family where if you didn't speak up, you got steamrolled. Silence meant agreement. Silence meant weakness. So I learned to always have a response ready, to never let anything slide, to make sure my voice was heard. But in my 30s, I started noticing a pattern. The times I regretted were almost always times when I'd spoken too quickly. The text I shouldn't have sent, the comment I shouldn't have made, the argument I shouldn't have escalated. Almost never did I regret staying quiet. There's a specific kind of situation where silence is revolutionary. When someone is determined to misunderstand you, you've explained yourself. They're not listening. They're just reloading their next accusation. And everything in you wants to keep trying, keep explaining, keep defending, because surely, if you find the right words, they'll get it. They won't. Not in that moment. Because they're not listening to understand. They're listening to be right. And when you keep engaging, you're not defending yourself. You're giving them ammunition. I learned this during a neighborhood dispute. A neighbor accused me of something I didn't do. Involved parking of all things. And I tried to explain, calmly at first, then less calmly. I provided evidence. I brought in witnesses, and with every piece of evidence, he just invented a new theory about why I was lying. The conversation went in circles for 45 minutes. Finally, exhausted, I just stopped talking. I said, I think we see this differently, and that's okay. Have a good evening. And I walked away. He called after me, still arguing, but I kept walking. And here's the surprising part. Within a week, he'd moved on. The thing that had felt so urgent, so critical to defend, just faded into nothing. That's what usually happens when you stop feeding the fire. People who are determined to argue need your participation. When you withdraw it, when you choose silence, the argument dies. But here's the deeper truth. Silence protects something more important than your reputation. It protects your peace. Every time you choose silence over the urge to defend, explain or prove yourself, you're reinforcing a belief that your worth is not up for debate. You're telling yourself, I don't need this person's understanding to know who I am. This doesn't mean you never speak up. If someone crosses a clear boundary, address it. If a relationship matters and there's genuine misunderstanding, communicate. But most of the time, silence is the wisest choice. Practice this. The next time you feel the urge to defend yourself, to explain, to make sure someone understands, pause. Ask yourself, will speaking right now help, or will it just feed my ego? If it's ego, if you're just trying to feel better or prove something, choose silence. Let your life speak for you. Let your actions tell the story over time. Trust that the people who matter will see who you are without needing constant explanations. And trust that your peace is worth more than winning any argument. Silence is not emptiness, it's fullness. It's the confidence of someone who knows that not every moment requires their voice, and that real strength isn't loud. It's quiet, it's steady, and it's yours whenever you choose it. Chapter 5, Pride's Whisper. There's a voice that lives in all of us. It sounds like you, but it's not you. It's fast, it's reactive, and it shows up the moment someone questions you, criticizes you, or makes you feel small. This voice says things like, "Who do they think they are?" Or "I need to set the record straight," or "They can't talk to me like that." That voice is pride, and learning to recognize it is one of the most important skills you can develop. Pride isn't always obvious. It doesn't always show up as arrogance. Sometimes it disguises itself as justice, as self-respect, as standing up for yourself. But here's the difference. Self-respect is calm. Pride is urgent. Self-respect knows its value and doesn't need to prove it. Pride needs to win, needs to be seen as right, needs to have the last word. I remember a performance review early in my career where my manager gave me feedback about my communication style. She said I sometimes came across as dismissive in meetings. My immediate internal reaction was fury. I wanted to list all the times I'd been patient, all the times I'd listened, all the ways she was wrong about me. That was pride. That fast, defensive surge that said, "How dare she? I need to correct this immediately." But I'd been working on recognizing this voice. So instead of speaking, I just nodded and said, "Can you give me an example?" And she did. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, she was right. I had been dismissive. Not intentionally, but impact matters more than intent. If I'd listened to pride, I'd have defended myself. I'd have damaged the relationship. I'd have missed an opportunity to grow. But because I'd learned to identify pride's whisper, I could choose differently. Here's how pride operates. It moves fast. It doesn't give you time to think. It floods your system with the urge to speak, to defend, to prove. And it feels righteous. It feels like you're standing up for yourself. But really, you're just standing up for your ego. Pride speaks to protect your image. Self-respect protects your peace. Pride needs others to see you a certain way. Self-respect only needs you to see yourself clearly. Pride creates conflict. Self-respect creates boundaries. Learning to tell the difference changed everything for me. Now, when I feel that urge to speak, that rush of emotion pushing me to respond, I ask myself one question: is this pride, or is this principle? If it's pride, it wants to win the moment. If it's principle, it's okay with losing the moment to win the long game. If it's pride, it's about me. If it's principle, it's about values bigger than me. I had a situation recently where someone took credit for my work in a meeting. Old me would have immediately corrected it. Would have said, "Actually, that was my idea." Would have made sure everyone knew, but I caught pride's whisper. That urge wasn't about truth. It was about making sure I was seen. So I stayed quiet. After the meeting, I pulled the person aside privately and said, "Hey, I noticed you presented that idea as yours. I'm guessing it was an honest mistake, but I did bring that up last week. Moving forward, can we make sure we're clear about attribution?" Same outcome. Different approach. One feeds pride and creates public tension. The other addresses the issue while maintaining respect for everyone involved. That's the difference. Pride costs you relationships. It costs you growth. It costs you peace. Because pride is never satisfied. You win one argument, and it immediately finds another battle. You prove yourself once, and it needs you to prove yourself again. It's exhausting. The alternative is humility. Not the false humility that pretends you're less than you are, real humility. The kind that says, I'm confident enough in who I am that I don't need to prove it to you. The kind that can receive criticism without collapsing. The kind that can let someone else be right without feeling diminished. I think about my grandfather, who died when I was in my 20s. He was a successful businessman, respected in our community, but I never once heard him brag. I never saw him argue to be right. And people gravitated to him because there was no ego to manage, no pride to tiptoe around. He was just solid, present, sure of himself without needing you to be sure of him too. That's the goal. Not to eliminate pride entirely. It's part of being human, but to recognize it, to catch it in the moment before it speaks, to ask yourself, is this helping, or is this just making me feel better? Starting today, pay attention to the fast voice, the one that rushes in when you feel criticized or questioned. Don't judge it, just notice it. Say to yourself, that's pride talking, and then pause. Give yourself 5 seconds. Often in those 5 seconds you'll find a better response. One that's grounded in who you actually want to be, not who pride is pushing you to be. Your reputation will survive someone being wrong about you. Your relationships will survive you not having the last word. Your peace will not survive you feeding pride every time it demands to be heard. Choose wisely. Chapter 6. The Space. My therapist once told me something that sounded insultingly simple. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your power. I rolled my eyes. I'd heard some version of that quote before, probably on Instagram. It felt like one of those empty platitudes people throw around to sound wise. But then she said something else. Most people live their entire lives without ever finding that space. They go straight from feeling to acting. And then they wonder why they keep getting the same results. That hit differently, because she was describing me. I was a straight line from emotion to action. Someone hurt my feelings. I withdrew. Someone criticized me. I defended. Someone cut me off in traffic. I honked and cursed. There was no space. There was just stimulus and immediate response, like a reflex. And the results were consistent. Damaged relationships, regretted words, consequences that outlasted the emotions that caused them. Here's the thing about emotions. They're temporary. All of them. Anger, excitement, jealousy, even deep sadness eventually passes or transforms. But decisions are often permanent. And when you make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions, you end up living with consequences long after the feeling is gone. I once quit a job in anger. My boss embarrassed me in a meeting, and I went back to my desk, typed up a resignation email, and sent it. I felt powerful in that moment, righteous, like I was standing up for myself. 2 weeks later, when the anger had completely faded, I realized I'd loved that job. I'd had a future there, and I'd thrown it away because I couldn't create space between feeling disrespected and acting on that feeling. The space between stimulus and response is where discipline lives. It's where you stop being a victim of your emotions and start being the author of your life. And building that space is a skill, not a trait. You're not born with it, you practice it. Here's how. When something triggers you, when you feel that rush of emotion pushing you toward action, physically stop. If you're about to send a text, put the phone down. If you're about to speak, close your mouth. If you're about to walk out of a room, stay seated. Just for a moment. In that moment, take 3 breaths. Not meditation breaths, just normal breaths. while you pay attention to breathing. This does something neurological. It activates your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning, and it calms your amygdala, the part responsible for emotional reaction. Then ask yourself one question: what do I actually want to happen here? Not what do you feel like doing. What do you want? Do you want to repair this relationship or damage it? Do you want to solve this problem or escalate it? Do you want to feel better for 5 minutes or be proud of yourself tomorrow? I use this now in every high-stakes interaction. My wife and I had an argument last month. She said something that felt deeply unfair, and I felt that familiar heat rising in my chest. The old me would have fired back immediately with something equally cutting. Instead, I said, "I need a minute," and I walked into another room. I took those 3 breaths, and I asked myself what I actually wanted. I wanted her to understand how her words had hurt me. But more than that, I wanted us to get through this without damage. I wanted to still like each other when this was over. When I came back, my tone was completely different. I said, "When you said that, I felt attacked. I don't think that's what you meant, but that's how it landed. Can we talk about what you were actually trying to say?" The conversation that followed was productive. Not easy, but productive. Because I'd found the space. I'd given myself the chance to respond, instead of react. And that space saved us from a fight that would have lasted days. Here's what most people get wrong. They think creating space means suppressing emotion. It doesn't. You still feel everything. The anger, the hurt, the defensiveness, it's all there. But you feel it without letting it drive. You acknowledge it without obeying it. Think of emotions like weather. When it's raining, you don't pretend it's sunny. You acknowledge the rain. But you also don't let the rain dictate whether you leave the house. You check the forecast, you grab an umbrella, you make a decision based on more than just the current conditions. That's what the space gives you. It gives you time to check the forecast, to see beyond the immediate feeling to the likely consequences, to make a choice that your future self will thank you for. I started practicing this in low-stakes situations first. When my kid interrupted me while I was working, instead of snapping at him, I'd pause, take a breath, remember that he's 6 and excited, and my irritation was about my stress, not his behavior. Then I'd respond with patience, instead of frustration. Those small practices built the muscle. So when the high-stakes moments came, when my job was on the line or my marriage was tense, I had the skill. The space was there because I'd practiced finding it. You can build this starting today. Pick one recurring trigger. Maybe it's traffic. Maybe it's a specific person at work. Maybe it's your phone buzzing during dinner. Whatever it is, commit to this. The next time it happens, you will pause before you act. You will take 3 breaths. You will ask what you actually want. It will feel awkward at first. It will feel slow. But awkward and slow are better than quick and regretted. And over time, it stops feeling awkward. The space becomes automatic. You start catching yourself before the words leave your mouth, before the text sends, before the damage is done. The strongest people I know aren't the ones who never feel things. They're the ones who feel everything and still make wise choices. They've mastered the space, and so can you. Because here's the truth. You are not your emotions. You are the one experiencing them. And between what you experience and what you do about it, there is always a space, always a choice, always a chance to be the person you actually want to be. Find that space. Protect it. Use it. It's where your real power lives. Chapter 7. Releasing the rope. I spent 2 years trying to get my brother to apologize. He'd done something at a family gathering that embarrassed me, and I felt he owed me an acknowledgement of that. So I brought it up, repeatedly, at holidays, in text messages, through other family members. I crafted careful explanations of why what he'd done was hurtful. I waited for the moment he'd finally see it. That moment never came. And in the meantime, I was miserable. Every family event was tense. Every conversation felt loaded. I was giving this man, who clearly had no intention of changing, complete control over my emotional state. Finally, a friend asked me a question that changed everything. "What are you getting out of this? Because it doesn't seem like it's working." It was right. I wasn't getting an apology. I wasn't getting acknowledgement. I wasn't getting anything except ongoing frustration and damaged family relationships. I was holding on to this rope, pulling and pulling, expecting my brother to eventually pull back, but he'd let go of the rope years ago. I was just pulling against myself. So I released it, not because my brother deserved it, not because I'd stopped caring, but because I realized I was trying to control something I had no control over. Someone else's behavior. Here's one of the hardest truths you'll ever have to accept. You cannot make people treat you right. You can't force respect. You can't demand consideration. You can't control how others show up in your life. You can only control how you respond and what you're willing to tolerate. People treat you based on their level of awareness, their emotional capacity, their own wounds and limitations. It's not about your worth. It's not even usually about you at all. And spending your energy trying to change their behavior is like standing in the rain and demanding it stop. You're going to get wet, and the rain doesn't care. I worked with a woman once, I'll call her Sarah, who was constantly trying to get her adult daughter to be more grateful. She'd do things for her, help with rent, watch the grandkids, and then feel hurt when there was no acknowledgement. She'd explain to her daughter how much she did. She'd point out everything she sacrificed. And the daughter would nod and then continue the same pattern. Sarah came to me, exhausted. "I just want her to see everything I do. Is that too much to ask?" "No," I told her, "but you're asking the wrong person. You're asking your daughter to change. What if instead you changed what you're willing to do?" Sarah looked offended at first. But I continued, "Your daughter is showing you who she is. She's not malicious. She's just not wired for gratitude right now. Maybe she'll grow into it. Maybe she won't. But you're making yourself miserable trying to force it. What if you helped when you genuinely wanted to, without expecting anything back? Or what if you helped less and protected your own peace?" This wasn't about excusing the daughter's behavior. It was about releasing Sarah from the prison of trying to control it, because that's what it is, a prison. When you tie your peace to someone else's choices, they're the warden and you're the inmate. Here's what releasing the rope looks like in practice. You stop reminding people how to treat you. If you have to constantly explain to someone that your time matters, that your feelings matter, that basic respect matters, you're with the wrong person. You don't need to change them. You need to change your proximity to them. This doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. Boundaries are essential. But boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about controlling your own participation. If you continue to speak to me this way, I'm going to leave the conversation. That's a boundary. It's not trying to make them stop. It's deciding what you'll accept for yourself. I released the rope with my brother by simply deciding I wasn't going to keep bringing it up. I wasn't going to wait for an apology. I wasn't going to let that incident define our relationship. When I saw him at family events, I was cordial. When he wanted to talk about sports, we talked about sports. I didn't pretend it never happened. I just stopped needing something from him that he clearly wasn't going to give. And here's what surprised me. I felt lighter. The constant tension, the rehearsed conversations in my head, the anger that would flare up every time I thought about it. All of that faded, because I'd taken my power back. I'd stopped giving him control over my peace. You probably have someone in your life right now who you're pulling that rope with. Someone who doesn't show up the way you want them to. Someone who disappoints you repeatedly. Someone who you keep explaining yourself to, hoping they'll finally understand. Let go of the rope. Not because they deserve it. Not because you don't care, but because your peace is worth more than being right. Because trying to control them is costing you control over yourself. Ask yourself, what am I getting out of this? What is it costing me? Is this person capable of giving me what I'm asking for? And if they're not, am I willing to accept that and adjust accordingly? Sometimes this means ending relationships. Sometimes it means accepting them for who they are and limiting what you expect. Sometimes it means creating more distance. But it always means releasing the illusion that you can make someone change. The people who are meant to be in your life will show up. They'll treat you with respect, not because you demanded it, but because that's who they are. The ones who don't, they're teaching you something too. They're teaching you who deserves your energy and who doesn't. Release the rope. Stop pulling. Let your standards become boundaries instead of demands. And watch how much lighter you feel when you stop trying to control what was never yours to control in the first place. Your peace isn't something you find. It's something you protect. And protecting it means knowing when to walk away from battles you were never meant to win. Chapter 8. The Trap of Over-Explaining. I once wrote a 3-page email to explain why I couldn't attend a distant acquaintance birthday party. 3 pages. For someone I barely knew. I explained my work schedule, my family commitments, my financial situation at the time. I practically included a notarized affidavit proving I had legitimate reasons. Looking back, I'm embarrassed. Not because I couldn't attend, but because I'd given so much energy to justifying a simple no. The truth is, I didn't owe that person 3 pages. I probably didn't owe them 3 sentences. I won't be able to make it, but I hope you have a great time. Would have been enough. But I had this deep, anxious need to be understood, to make sure no one thought poorly of me, to prove that my reasons were valid, and that need, that constant over-explaining, was exhausting me. Here's what I've learned. Most people who demand explanations aren't looking to understand, they're looking to argue. And when you explain yourself to someone who isn't actually open to hearing you, you're not clarifying, you're just giving them more ammunition. I had a colleague who would question every decision I made as a manager. Why did I approve that expense? Why did I choose that vendor? Why did I schedule the meeting at that time? At first, I'd explain, in detail, with reasoning and data, and every explanation would lead to another question, another angle of attack, disguised as curiosity. Then one day, I tried something different. When he asked why I'd made a certain decision, I said, because I determined it was the best option. No elaboration, no justification, just a simple statement. He pushed back, but don't you think? I interrupted, I understand you might have done it differently. I'm confident in the choice I made. The conversation ended, because there was nothing to argue with. I hadn't given him anything to pick apart. I'd simply owned my decision and refused to defend it beyond that. This doesn't mean you never explain yourself. If someone genuinely wants to understand, if they're asking from a place of curiosity rather than judgment, explanation can be valuable, but you have to learn to tell the difference. Here are the signs someone isn't really listening. They interrupt your explanation with rebuttals. They bring up past examples to prove a pattern. They're asking why, but they're really saying you're wrong. When you sense that, stop explaining. You're wasting your breath. I see this most often in personal relationships. Someone feels hurt, and instead of expressing the hurt, they attack. Why did you say that? Why didn't you text me back? Why do you always do this? And the person being questioned scrambles to explain, to justify, to prove they're not the villain. But here's the thing. If someone has already decided you're the villain, no explanation will change their mind. In fact, the more you explain, the guiltier you look. Your explanations become proof that you're defensive. Your justifications become proof that you're hiding something. I learned this the painful way in a relationship that ended badly. My partner at the time had decided I was emotionally unavailable. Every time I tried to explain my perspective, to share what I was actually feeling, she'd find a way to twist it into evidence of my unavailability. See, you're analyzing instead of feeling. You're explaining instead of just being present. I couldn't win, because she wasn't listening to understand. She was listening to confirm what she'd already decided, and I was exhausting myself trying to change her mind. Eventually, I stopped explaining. I said, "I hear that you feel I'm unavailable. I see myself differently, but I can't make you see me the way I see myself. If that's how you experience me, then maybe we're not compatible." The relationship ended, and as much as that hurt, it was a relief, because I'd stopped contorting myself, trying to prove something to someone who wasn't interested in seeing it. Your peace is more valuable than being understood by everyone. In fact, being understood by everyone is impossible. You will be misread. You will be misjudged. You will be misquoted and misrepresented, and most of the time, there is nothing you can say that will change that. So stop trying. Save your explanations for people who deserve them, for people who are actually listening, for people who trust you enough to give you the benefit of the doubt instead of demanding you prove yourself. For everyone else, let your life speak. Let your actions over time tell the story that your words can't. People who matter will see you for who you are. People who don't aren't worth the energy. Here's a practice that changed my life. Before you explain yourself, ask, is this person open to understanding me? Or have they already made up their mind? If they've made up their mind, save your breath. Your silence will serve you better than any explanation. And here's another practice. Get comfortable with people being wrong about you. It's going to happen. Often. And it's not your job to correct every misunderstanding. Your job is to know who you are and live accordingly. The right people will see it. The wrong people won't. And that's okay. You don't owe the world a dissertation on your choices. You don't owe strangers justification for your decisions. You barely owe friends and family detailed explanations beyond basic respect and communication. What you owe yourself is this: the confidence to stand in your choices without needing validation from people who aren't invested in your well-being. The wisdom to recognize when someone is asking to understand versus asking to attack, and the peace that comes from knowing that your worth is not up for debate. Stop over-explaining. Start living in a way that makes explanation unnecessary, and trust that the people who are meant to be in your life will understand you without you having to prove yourself constantly. Your energy is finite. Spend it on people who replenish it, not people who drain it demanding justification for your existence. Chapter 9. Guarding your energy. I used to pride myself on being available. Anytime, any person, any problem. Someone needed to vent at midnight, I'd answer. Acquaintance needed help moving for the 3rd time this year, I'd show up. I thought this made me a good person. What it actually made me was exhausted. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on a call with a friend who was having the same relationship problem she'd had for 2 years. I'd listened to this story dozens of times. I'd given advice. I'd supported her, and nothing ever changed. Because she never actually wanted to change. She just wanted to talk about it. Halfway through the call, I realized I was furious. Not at her, but at myself. Because I'd voluntarily gotten on this call. I'd known exactly how it would go, and I'd done it anyway, sacrificing an hour I needed for my own work, my own rest, my own life. When the call ended, I sat there and asked myself a hard question. How many times have I given my energy to people and situations that give nothing back? The answer was uncomfortable. Constantly. Here's what no one tells you about being a giving person. If you don't guard your energy, people will take it. Not maliciously, usually. They'll just take what you offer. And if you're always offering, even when your tank is empty, you'll wake up one day depleted, resentful, and wondering why you have nothing left for yourself. Energy isn't infinite. Every interaction, every emotion, every commitment draws from the same well. And if you're constantly pulling from that well without refilling it, you run dry. Then you're no good to anyone, including yourself. I started paying attention to how I felt after interactions. Some people left me energized, conversations that, even if they were deep or challenging, somehow refilled my tank, but others left me drained. Not just tired, but depleted, like they'd taken something from me I couldn't get back. The drained category wasn't always obvious. Sometimes it was people I loved, family members who needed constant reassurance, friends who only called when they had problems, colleagues who treated my time like an unlimited resource. I realized I'd been operating under a faulty belief that saying no made me selfish, that boundaries made me cold, that protecting my energy meant I didn't care. But none of that was true. What was true was that I'd become a shell of myself trying to be everything to everyone, and that helped no one. So I started practicing something radical. I started choosing where my energy went. This looked different in different relationships. For some people, I started limiting the time I made available. Instead of hour-long calls, whenever they wanted, I'd schedule 30-minute coffee dates. Instead of being available for crisis calls at all hours, I'd respond the next day. Instead of always being the one who reached out, I'd wait and see if the relationship was actually reciprocal. The results were immediate and uncomfortable. Some people didn't like the new boundaries. They pushed back. They accused me of changing, of not caring, of being selfish. And those reactions told me everything I needed to know. Because the people who truly valued me didn't fight my boundaries. They respected them. One friend, when I told her I needed to cut our weekly venting sessions to bi-weekly because I was overwhelmed, said, "Of course, I don't want to add to your stress. Let me know when you have the space." That's someone who respects your energy. Another person, when I stopped being immediately available for their every crisis, said, "I thought I could count on you. I guess I was wrong." That's someone who was using your energy, not honoring it. Guarding your energy doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. It means being intentional. It means recognizing that you're a human being with limits, and honoring those limits is an act of self-respect, not selfishness. Think about it this way. If you drain your own well, taking care of everyone else, who takes care of you? Who's left to show up for your own life? You can't pour from an empty cup. That's not a cliche. That's physics. I started asking myself before committing to anything, does this refill me, or does this drain me? If it drains me, is it necessary and temporary, or is it unnecessary and recurring? Necessary and temporary, like helping a friend through a genuine crisis, is worth the drain. Unnecessary and recurring, like being someone's free therapist indefinitely, is not. This also meant getting honest about my motivations. Sometimes I said yes, not because I wanted to help, but because I wanted to be seen as helpful, because I wanted to be needed, because I was afraid of disappointing people. Those yeses were costing me my peace. Now, when I say yes, it's clean. I'm choosing it fully, not out of obligation or guilt. And when I say no, I don't over-explain. "I don't have the capacity for that right now" is a complete sentence. I don't owe anyone a breakdown of my calendar or my mental bandwidth to justify my boundaries. Here's what happened when I started guarding my energy. The people who mattered stayed. The people who were just using me faded away, and I had space, actual mental and emotional space, to be present for my own life, to pursue things I cared about, to rest without guilt, to show up as my best self for the people who reciprocated that energy. You cannot be everything to everyone, and trying will destroy you. Your energy is your most valuable resource, more valuable than your time, because you can be physically present, but energetically checked out. When your energy is gone, you have nothing left to give. Start paying attention today. Notice who and what leaves you feeling filled versus drained. Notice when you're saying yes out of genuine desire versus obligation. Notice where you're pouring yourself into bottomless pits. Then start making different choices. Small at first. Say no to one thing that drains you. Set one boundary with someone who takes too much. Give yourself permission to refill before you pour out. This isn't selfish. This is necessary. You matter. Your well-being matters. And protecting your energy isn't about building walls. It's about building a life that's actually sustainable. Guard your energy like it's the precious resource it is. Because it is. And once you do, everything else starts to fall into place. Chapter 10. Leading Yourself. The moment that changed everything for me happened on a morning when I didn't feel like getting out of bed. I was tired. I was discouraged. A project I'd invested months into had fallen apart, and I thought, what's the point? Why not just stay here? But then I remembered something my mentor once told me. Your emotions are the worst boss you could ever have. They'll tell you to quit when you're one step from success. They'll tell you to lash out when you need to listen. They'll tell you to hide when you need to show up. If you let them lead, you'll never get where you actually want to go. So I got up, not because I felt like it, but because I decided that my goals mattered more than my mood. That's what leadership looks like. Not the kind where you manage other people, the kind where you manage yourself. Most people live their lives as followers of their own emotions. They feel motivated, so they take action. They feel discouraged, so they quit. They feel angry, so they lash out. They feel anxious, so they avoid. They're not leading their lives. Their emotions are. But emotions, as real and valid as they are, make terrible leaders. They're reactive. They're short-sighted. They prioritize feeling better right now over being better long-term. If you follow your emotions, you'll end up wherever they take you, which is rarely where you actually want to go. Leading yourself means this. You acknowledge what you feel, but you act based on what you value. You honor your emotions without obeying them. You recognize that feelings are information, not instructions. I felt like quitting my business at least a dozen times in the first year. It was hard. The money wasn't coming in. I was working 80-hour weeks. Every rejection felt personal. My emotions kept saying, this isn't working. Give up. Go back to something safer. But my values said something different. My values said I wanted to build something meaningful. I wanted autonomy. I wanted to look back on my life and know I'd tried. So when my emotions said quit, my values said keep going, and I chose to follow my values. That's leadership. It's doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it. It's showing up, even when you're scared. It's choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. It's being the adult in your own life instead of the child who just wants to feel comfortable. This doesn't mean you ignore your emotions. Emotions are signals. Fear might be telling you to prepare better. Anger might be telling you a boundary was crossed. Sadness might be telling you to grieve. But once you receive the message, you don't let the emotion make the decision. You lead. Think about parents. Good parents don't let their kids eat candy for every meal just because the kids want to. They understand that what feels good in the moment isn't always what's best. Long term, they lead with wisdom, not with whatever makes the child happy right now. You have to be that parent to yourself. Your emotions are like children, loud, insistent, convinced that what they want right now is all that matters. Your job is to be the adult, to hear them, to care for them, but not to let them drive the car. I practice this daily now. When I wake up and don't feel like exercising, I recognize the feeling. I don't shame myself for it. But then I ask, what kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to be someone who only takes care of himself when it's convenient, or do I want to be someone who keeps commitments even when they're hard? The answer determines my action, not my mood, my values. When I'm in a conflict and feel like saying something cutting, I pause. I acknowledge the anger, but then I ask, what kind of partner do I want to be? Do I want to win this argument or strengthen this relationship? What I value determines what I say, not what I feel in that moment. This is what separates people who achieve their goals from people who just have goals. The ones who achieve them don't feel motivated every day. They don't always feel like showing up, but they've made a decision that their commitments outweigh their feelings. They lead themselves. I'm not talking about toxic productivity or ignoring your mental health. Rest is a value too. Self-care is a value. Sometimes leading yourself means saying, I'm exhausted and I need a break. That's not following your emotions. That's following your value of long-term sustainability over short-term pushing through. The difference is intentionality. Are you resting because you've decided rest serves your long-term goals, or are you avoiding because you feel like it? One is leadership, the other is followership. Here's how to practice this. Identify 3 values that matter to you. Maybe it's integrity. Maybe it's growth. Maybe it's family. Write them down. Then when you're faced with a decision, especially when your emotions are strong, ask, which choice aligns with my values? Your emotions will often say one thing. Your values might say another. And in that moment, you get to choose who's in charge, the temporary feeling or the permanent standard. I'll be honest, this is hard. It's much easier to just do what feels good, to follow the path of least resistance, to let your mood determine your day. But easy doesn't get you where you want to go. Easy gets you wherever the wind blows you. Leading yourself is hard, but it's also the most empowering thing you'll ever do. Because when you lead yourself, you stop being a victim of your emotions. You stop saying, I couldn't help it. I was angry. I was scared. I didn't feel like it. You start saying, I chose this. Even though it was hard, even though I didn't feel like it, I chose what aligned with who I want to be. That's power. Real power. Not the power to control others or control circumstances. The power to control yourself. To be the person you want to be, regardless of what you feel in any given moment. Start today. Pick one area where you've been letting your emotions lead. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's your work. Decide what you value in that area. Then the next time your emotions push you one way, pause. Ask what your values say, and choose to follow those. You'll feel the resistance. Your emotions don't like being demoted from leader to advisor, but over time, as you practice this, something incredible happens. You start trusting yourself, because you become someone who keeps commitments, who shows up, who does what he says he'll do. And that trust, that self-respect that comes from leading yourself is worth more than any temporary comfort you get from following your feelings. You were meant to lead yourself, to feel everything but be controlled by nothing, to live with intention instead of just reacting to whatever emotion shows up. So lead. Your life is waiting. Conclusion. The path forward. We've covered a lot of ground together. From learning to create space between feeling and action, to letting people be wrong about you, to guarding your energy like the precious resource it is. These aren't just concepts, they're skills. And like any skill, they require practice. The truth is, you're going to forget these lessons sometimes. You're going to react when you meant to respond. You're going to over-explain when you meant to stay silent. You're going to let someone drain your energy when you meant to protect it. That's not failure, that's being human. But here's what changes. You'll notice faster. You'll catch yourself mid-reaction and adjust. You'll recognize the patterns. And over time, the space between trigger and response will grow. The voice of pride will get quieter. The urge to control others will lose its grip. You'll start living from your values instead of your emotions. This is not a destination. It's a practice. A daily choice to lead yourself instead of being led by whatever you happen to feel. So here's your action plan. 7 commitments you can make starting today. First, practice the pause. Before you speak, before you text, before you act on a strong emotion, take 3 breaths. Create the space. In that space, ask what you actually want to happen. Second, let go of one rope you're pulling. Identify one person or situation where you're trying to control something you can't control. Release it. Stop giving your peace away, trying to change them. Third, guard your energy. Say no to one thing this week that drains you. Set one boundary with someone who takes too much. Give yourself permission to refill. Fourth, catch pride's whisper. Pay attention to the fast voice that rushes in to defend, to prove, to win. When you hear it, pause. Ask if this is pride or principle. Choose accordingly. Fifth, sit with one uncomfortable emotion instead of running from it. Feel it fully. Notice where it lives in your body. Watch it transform when you stop avoiding it. Sixth, choose silence over explanation in one situation where you'd normally defend yourself. Trust that your integrity speaks louder than your words. And seventh, lead yourself in one area where you've been following your emotions. Choose based on your values, not your mood. Do what needs doing even when you don't feel like it. These 7 practices will change your life. Not overnight, not easily, but consistently, powerfully, permanently. You are not your emotions. You are the one experiencing them. And between what you experience and what you do about it, there is always space, always choice, always the opportunity to be who you actually want to be, instead of who your feelings are pushing you to be. The strongest people I know feel everything. They're not numb. They're not detached. They're fully alive, fully present, fully feeling, but they're not controlled by what they feel. They acknowledge it, they learn from it, and then they choose their response based on something deeper than temporary emotion. You can be that person. You already have everything you need. You just have to practice using it. So starting today, starting right now, commit to mastering yourself, not controlling others, not managing circumstances, not fixing every misunderstanding, but leading yourself with clarity, intention, and courage. This is your life. Your one shot at being fully alive. Don't waste it being dragged around by emotions that come and go like weather. Stand in the storm. Feel the wind. But keep your feet planted in something solid. Your values, your integrity, your commitment to being the person you want to be. That's where real power lives. Not in reacting to everything, but in choosing how you respond to anything. The calm in the storm isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of leadership. Your leadership over yourself. Now go lead.